And good evening, everyone. We have with us today interesting set of speakers from all across the world, starting from we have with us today an interesting set of people to talk about water management challenges. I know that for the last few days, many of you have hearing about many of the water issues. And in order to make cities resilient to water challenges in light of climate change, we need to understand and unpackage the complexity of water management alongside other urban issues. In order to do that, the approach to build water resilience should be holistic in nature and should take into consideration all aspects, including infrastructure, environment, social, especially human, and more importantly, governance. And cities should set out water resilience strategies and create a sustainable route map supported by effective institutional arrangements. And sustainable water management should also be circular, given the current aspects of drought and water scarcity faced by cities across the world. It puts recycling not as an optional, but a mandatory mechanism. In order for us to meaningfully engage and debate and look at various practices, we have with us a varied set of speakers from all across the world to talk about some of these aspects, ranging from institutional mechanisms, governance mechanisms, social, and also water management from a resilience perspective. Without further ado, I would request all the panelists to please stick to their time so that we can have a few minutes for summarizing some of the things, findings, and also concluding it in a more effective manner. And also, it's important that we keep the introductions brief. So I'll keep my introduction pretty brief with that. So myself, I'm Uma Mahesh Rajshekhar. I'm part of National Institute of Urban Affairs, which is working as a think tank under the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. And with that, I'll call upon the first speaker, Panchali. Panchali, over to you to start with the first session on urban water management.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rajashekhar, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Panchali Saikia. I'm from the Stockholm International Water Institute, Sweden. In this segment of the session, we will learn about initiatives and actions taken to build urban water resilience. But before we proceed to the cities, let me highlight some key points to give you the context to this segment of case studies. From the sessions today at the Water Pavilion, we heard from several speakers that as cities stand at the forefront of climate change impacts, urgent actions are needed to confront the climate crisis. One of these key action areas will be cities adopting an integrated and holistic approach with water at the heart of policies, planning, and investments that can provide the foundation for transformation towards sustainable and resilient cities. Only focusing on increasing and expanding the climate resilient infrastructure will not be adequate. Equally important will be building the adaptive capacity of cities and creating an enabling environment through improved water governance. By this, we mean that promoting multi-sector stakeholder coordination and collaboration, inclusive, integrated, and evidence-based decision-making and planning, including broader community participation, leadership commitment and common visioning, financial transparency and efficiency, effective regulations and accountability, and also strengthening institutional arrangements. To achieve these objectives, planning and decision-making tools will be very critical that can help support cities, and one such is the city water resilience approach. You may have heard from our colleague from Arup, Luis Ellis, who presented about the tool in the previous session. So the city water resilience approach enables cities to take a holistic approach, engaging diverse stakeholders, doing an assessment of water resilience capacity in city, identifying key action areas that reflect and integrate the key resilience building factors from infrastructure to protecting environment, human health and well-being and governance. It has contributed largely in strengthening different cities' efforts and strategies around climate adaptation and resilience, such as the Resilient 305 strategy of Greater Miami and the beaches, providing scope for implementation plan of the Cape Town's water strategy, contributing to efforts by the Living with Water Partnership in Hull and several other cities. And the newly joining cities in this collaboration and process is the city of Vishakhapatnam, Vizag in India, and Abuja in Nigeria. Not taking much time, let me first welcome the Commissioner of Greater Vishakhapatnam Municipal Corporation, Dr. G. Lakshmisha, to share about what his city is doing around this area of climate adaptation and water resilience. Over to you, Honorable Commissioner. Please unmute yourself and switch on your video. You have 8 minutes to the presentation. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Panchali. So, can I ask to project my PPT, please? Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Please go ahead.
My PPT is not casted. My presentation.
Yes, you will be able to see it under the water pavilion, the window that you have the PPT there.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Good evening to all the dignitaries from across the globe. I am Dr. G. Lakshmisha, Commissioner, Greater Vishakhapatnam Municipal Corporation, Andhra Pradesh, India. I feel it as a great privilege to take part in this conference. Today, I am presenting on initiatives and actions by administration to make Vishakhapatnam a resilient city with specific focus on climate and water. Next slide, please. Okay. So, coming to Vishakhapatnam, once it was a small fishing village, slowly and steadily, it evolved as a coastal industrial city. It's also called a jewel of East Coast of India, a city of destiny. Our city has about 620 square kilometers area with 2 million plus population. From administrative point of view, the city is divided into 8 zones and 98 wards. It is one among the 100 smart cities identified by Government of India. Being a coastal city, it is more prone to extreme, it is like cyclones, floods, heat waves, erosion, etc. Well, need not to mention the impact of climate change. While the city has diversified geographical features like plains, coasts, hill terrains, marshy area, estuaries, river system, etc., the city is in constant state of negotiation between adversities and advantages to excel towards becoming a resilient day by day. Next slide, please. Steps taken towards the resilience. Water management. There are about 7 major sources from which water is supplied to the city. 395 ml water is supplied to the city every day. The distance from where this water is sourced ranges from 10 kilometers to 153 kilometers. 11 water treatment plants with a capacity of 489 mld exists for treating the raw water. Per capita supply of water is average about 105 to 110 LPCD against the standard of 135 LPCD. Water meters are also arranged at many locations to monitor the water consumption. The city is divided into 20 sewerage blocks and covered with underground drainage system for about 40% of area and 60% of population. There are 3 sewage treatment plants in addition to industrial bodies' own effluent treatment plants. So that I can say that our city is having a decentralized wastewater treatment facility. Further, the treated water is reused in the industries for various operations. We are encouraging our citizens for water conservation, harvest rainwater at every household level. The industries are mandated to construct the rainwater harvest structures at their premises. With the launch of Swachh Bharat mission in 2014 by Government of India, there is a huge difference in the city with respect to sanitation and cleanliness. We are conducting wash activities at community through Swachh Bharat mission and Clean Andhra Pradesh program. At school level, wash activities are conducted through Swachh Bharat and Swachh Vidyalaya campaign also. With the experience from the cyclone Hudud, most part of the city's pooled electricity supply is upgraded to underground cabling system with the help of World Bank Disaster Recovery Project. Underground drainage system and climate resilience designs are also made part and parcel of the infrastructure development in the city. To protect the lives of the citizens from the landslides and erosion, we have constructed retention walls at the landslide prone areas. Another major structural mitigation project related to the coastal erosion and sea level rise is shoreline protection projects. 3 types of major project scheduled under the disaster management component, covering pre, during, and post-disaster activities. Next slide, please. The UNDP GOI USAID projects were implemented mainly focusing on the institutional strengthening, disaster preparedness and mitigation, climate risk management and community resilience. Under these projects, hazard risk and vulnerability assessment studies conducted. Disaster management plans prepared, capacity building programs are also conducted. City Operating Center, COC, established under the Smart City Mission, plays a key role in emergency management and supports the administration of the city in real-time risk assessment and quick decision-making. Engineering section, through Public Works and World Bank's Disaster Recovery Project, covers post-disaster construction, recovery, and retrofitting activities. We are happy to announce that in our city, we could able to maintain more than 30% green cover in association with the relevant departments like Department of Horticulture, Forestry, Industries, NGOs, and community through various plantation and parks development. There are other prominent steps taken towards making the city climate resilient are LED street lighting as a model of energy conservation and efficiency. E-vehicles have been deployed to reduce carbon footprint. Solar energy generation units are established on rooftops, on parking spaces, etc. In fact, India's first floating solar plant was constructed at Mutsurlova Reservoir of Vishakhapatnam city. Next slide, please. Further, for long-term sustainability of UNDP GOI projects, activities and cities initiatives, Sustainability and Resilience Program has been initiated by establishing Sustainability and Resilience Unit under the Commissioner GVMC, Andhra Pradesh. The SRP and SRU will extend its support to the entire state of Andhra Pradesh and associations with the national and international entities. Objectives of SRP and SRU is to achieve comprehensive, sustainable, and resilient development of Vishakhapatnam city, to support the state government in achieving sustainable development goals, institutional strengthening and promote better governance in the city, to implement policies, frameworks, and best practices laid out by the government. Sustainable and resilient units will work directly through its 4 cells, namely environmental cell, climate cell, disaster management cell, and human resource development cell. Sustainable and resilient unit components are planning and mainstreaming the disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation, implementation of sustainable development goals, environment management, climate risk management, disaster management, human resource development, research and innovation, development of urban observatory, knowledge management, partnership, collaboration, and convergence. Whereas climate cell activities includes implementation of climate change action plan, promotion of green growth, renewable and clean energy, climate change adaptation, awareness program, health and well-being, and nature-based solutions. Climate and water-related activities which are under active consideration for the city are preparation of city water resilience plan with the technical support from the Stockholm International Water Institute and the National Institute of Urban Affairs through CBC City Water Resilience Approach, CWRA, to the city. Water bodies restoration projects, natural drains catchment area development, structural dialogues for sustainable urban water management, National Clean Air Program, geotagging of the city's water bodies, plantation programs. Finally, Vishakhapatnam Smart Cities mission target is to develop Vishakhapatnam as a healthy, resilient, and livable city. I thank the Stockholm International Water Institute, Sweden, and the National Institute of Urban Affairs, New Delhi, India, for giving me this opportunity to involve my city, Vishakhapatnam, in this climate water conclave. We will be very happy to participate in any studies, pilot projects, and associations which aimed for the sustainable development and helpful to the world. I take this opportunity to cordially invite the delegates to this jewel city and to the city of destiny to appreciate our efforts towards resilience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, for sharing and inviting us to be part of this collaboration effort. I think it's an incredible journey. And what learning experience you shared about these initiatives of improving water services, not just at the household level, but also in schools, is, I think, very critical step to move towards resiliency. And also the institutional approach that you're taking by having this sustainability resilience unit in the city is one step ahead for that. Now let's move ahead with the next city to a different continent here. Let's move to Abuja, and I would like to invite Dr. Liberty McBeanie from University of Abuja and Professor Colin Thron from University of Nottingham to share about their initiatives and approaches in Abuja. You have 8 minutes. Over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Panchali. Blue-green cities offer a vision for a better water future, one that unites water management and green infrastructure to recreate a more natural water cycle in ways that generate economic, environmental, ecological, social, and cultural benefits. The blue-green city is a concept that encapsulates multiple approaches to urban water resilience, including water-sensitive urban design, best management practices, sustainable drainage systems, and green infrastructure. But these are paradigms that are well understood by water professionals, but are less accessible to the intended beneficiaries. Next slide. The research was undertaken by a dozen UK universities, led by the University of Nottingham, through the Blue-Green Cities and the Urban Flood Resilience Research Consortia. Sorry, could we advance the slide? I see we're still on the first one. Yeah, thank you. Next slide, please. Our approach put communications with city authorities and communities at the very center of the research, rather than on the periphery. Next. But hydrology and engineering provide the foundation for innovation, and we develop new models to simulate current urban and flood water issues and their management. Click. Urban flooding affects citizens primarily, and we studied both the anxieties and the preferences of citizens with respect to urban flooding and how it should be managed. Next. We used the outcomes of these work packages to design integrated systems of blue, green, and gray assets, and we developed a GIS-based tool, next click, to evaluate the benefits of blue-green approaches rigorously. Next. In parallel, we partnered with Newcastle upon Tyne and Ebbsfleet Garden City in demonstration case studies. Next slide. The 2016 Newcastle Declaration commits the signatories to expanding the amount of blue-green infrastructure in Newcastle and in towns and cities across the UK. And today, the city's blue-green implementation group continues to deliver progress towards a blue-green future. Next slide. Ebbsfleet is a new city being built in and around some abandoned quarries just east of London. The Ebbsfleet Development Corporation is following water-sensitive urban design principles, and their implementation framework is titled Bringing in the Green and the Blue. Next slide, please. They state in that implementation plan, waterscapes and green corridors are to be a defining feature of Ebbsfleet's streets, parks, and neighborhoods. In summary, the consortia developed and helped implement innovative strategies for managing urban water and flood risk as part of wider integrated urban planning to achieve environmental enhancement, urban renewal, and urban growth, in which the multiple co-benefits of blue-green cities can be both delivered and rigorously evaluated. In 2020, the University of Nottingham appointed Dr. Liberty Mbanye to lead a new blue-green initiative in Nigeria, designed to find sustainable solutions to future flood and water resilience issues in Abuja. Dr. Mbanye will now tell you what happened next. Over to you, Dr. Mbanye.
All right. Nigeria is building cities for the future like Abuja, which is justifiably referred to as heart of Nigeria, the center of unity, and whose master planning and philosophy envisages the nation's capital as providing a green, livable urban environment fit for the 21st century. Next. The aim of Blue-Green Abuja, first, is to disseminate research and exchange practical knowledge about blue-green cities with urban planning decision makers and practitioners. Second, to build a network of academics in Nigerian and UK universities to teach and research about using blue-green and gray infrastructure. And third, to deliver a pilot housing project in a suitable area of Abuja that demonstrates the multiple benefits of integrated blue-green and gray infrastructure. Next. The core team I built is made up of early career Nigerian academics with a range of disciplinary specialization well suited to partnering with Abuja's flood and water management practitioners in delivering a blue-green future. They are Adedeji Aremu, Bashiru Shehu, Jonah Joshua, Liberty Mwanyi, Mercy Ade, Olamide Esho, Olumise Efebukan. The team appreciates and benefits from mentoring by Professor Tone. Next, Arab is partnering with us in Blue Green Abuja. The firm is a collective with over 16,000 staff working across 140 countries. A primary goal of theirs is to develop sustainable cities while balancing the need of a growing world population with the finite resources and health of our planet. We share these core values and appreciate the experience and global reach that partnering with them brings to Blue Green Abuja. Next, Stockholm International Water Institute is also our international partner. As advocates and advisors, we help water stakeholders in cities across the world to discover that improved water governance is the key to a fairer, more prosperous, and resilient future. We agree and are pleased that they are partnering with us in Blue Green Abuja. Next, we have already built a stakeholder network in Abuja. Key organizations include federal authorities such as the Federal Capital Administration, National Emergency Management Agency, Ministry of Works and Housing, Abuja's Water Board, Environmental Management Agencies, West Management Agency, and Parks and Recreation Department. These and all the other stakeholders, organizations represented in this slide have endorsed the Blue Green Abuja initiative and agreed to join us in our quest. Next, at the Blue Green Abuja Initiation Workshop this September, stakeholders passionately voiced their concern and ambition about the floods and water challenges facing Abuja City and the National Capital Territory. In response, we propose a collaborative and inclusive process of assessing Abuja's current water resilience and then using the blue-green paradigm to envisage a better water future for Abuja. We believe that knowledge developed by blue-green cities and urban flow resilient research consortia can be levered to help Abuja become more robustly resilient to floods and droughts, while also benefiting water quality, air quality, soil quality, public amenity, urban livability, and public health. Blue Green Abuja will provide the impetus for expanding the use of nature-based solutions in the heart of Nigeria, with experience gained circulating naturally to cities throughout Nigeria and potentially across West Africa. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. McBurney and Professor Throne, for sharing the learning experiences from the Blue Green initiatives. And indeed, it will be very useful in terms of building this collaboration and network and partnership across universities, development organizations, city partners, private sectors, which brings opportunity for cities to build climate and water resilience and will be critical to make resilience a reality. Now, moving on to the next segment, I'll hand it over to Steve Metcalf from Water and Sanitation for the Urban Pro UK, who will lead the next part of the case study segment. Thank you so much. Over to you, Steve.
Hi, everyone. Many thanks, Panchali, and all those speakers for that excellent segment on citywide water resilience. I'm Steve Metcalf. I'm Head of Partnerships and Communications, Water and Sanitation for the Urban Pro. And over the next 20 minutes, we're going to dig a bit deeper into what it means to create urban water resilience, with a particular focus on those most affected by climate change. For this session, we'll look at the poorest urban communities, living in informal settlements where not only is water access compromised, but where residents face a whole range of issues such as poor road access, lack of land tenure, and inadequate drainage. We're going to talk about how creating urban water resiliency in these communities requires these issues to be addressed together. So we're going to hear from Mario Kainga at the Nairobi Council about an integrated informal settlement upgrading initiative, including investments to water access. And we're going to hear from Silva Magaya, councillor at the Maputo Municipal Council, about how improvements to water and sanitation connect with land rights and spatial planning. But before that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Ida Mati, Country Programme Manager for WUSA Kenya, who's going to explain a bit more about how in the poorest urban communities, water access links to other urban challenges. Eden, over to you for your 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Steve. And it's a great pleasure to be here. So I'm going to introduce to you urban resilience in the lens of WhatsApp. So urban water resilience means that everyone in a city has acceptable access to water and sanitation. So acceptable access by our definition means reliability, quality, affordability, and also dignity when it comes to sanitation services. What we have built up along the years is the need to focus on those who are most at risk from climate change. And this is core to our mission as WhatsApp. So those who are at risk are mainly those living in the informal settlements across our cities. And with the rapid rural-urban migration in Kenya and lots of in Kenya and Mozambique, and lots of climate-induced migration into these areas, we have a lot of stress on water and sanitation services, and this leads to the need for an integrated approach into tackling water issues, urban water and sanitation issues. So some of the physical characteristics that the physical characteristics and the locations of informal settlements means that the communities in the informal settlements across our cities are the most at risk from climate change. And I'd like to highlight some of the different ways in which these urban challenges exacerbate poor access to water and sanitation. So we have low quality housing, seeing that the cost of housing in our major cities is an inhibitor to decent housing. This means that essential services such as sewerage or even tapping water into the household becomes quite a big impediment. Narrow streets and haphazard terrain in most of all our informal settlements. You'll notice that in the cities, these informal settlements tend to be set up or mushroom in areas where it's very hard to do physical planning by the city planners, and mostly areas that would have been condemned and not really reclaimed by other people in society. We have uncertain land tenure in informal settlements, and this is a big hindrance when it comes to formal service providers formalizing contracts for services to these residents, whether it's connections for water, connections for sewerage, formalizing solid waste management, and so on. Uncertain land tenure obviously means that the residents of this area are not permanent residents, and there's reluctance in programming and planning and investments into these informal settlements. Then the lack of solid waste management is one of the key issues which have exacerbated poor access to sanitation. And we have the pit latrines that are most common in these areas filling up, and everything now gets disposed and emptied back into the environment. And it's practically very difficult to implement and operate sewerage systems in these areas because they become the option for dumping of solid wastes. Poor drainage is one of the things that misses in these informal settlements, and that again, in terms of climate resilience, becomes a big issue when there's flooding, and we are not able to manage draining of the water out of low-lying informal settlements. All in a nutshell, we have seen, and what we have witnessed is disintegrated project interventions on all the issues I have just mentioned. And when it comes at a city level for city authorities and planners, we have to think together towards an integrated approach towards addressing the various issues I have just underscored. Because again, the climate-induced migration that's driving the huge demand for basic services in cities is definitely going to increase, and a solution needs to be found as soon as possible for us to make sure that we are being resilient. Thank you, and I hand back over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Eden, for those insights into the linkage between water and other complex urban issues. So I'd now like to introduce Mario Kainga, the Director for Water, Sanitation and Energy at the Nairobi City County, who's going to present a short case study of work taking place in one of the city's low-income communities that talks more about this integrated approach. So Mario, over to you for your 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. And I will be very brief on this. First, I would like to give a brief of Nairobi. Nairobi is the capital city of Kenya and also the seat of the government, and also where we have the diplomats and UN, like United Nations and Environment Program. So it's a quite a fast-growing city with complex issues of informal settlement, that is slum growth. One of the slums is Mukuru. Mukuru is constituted of 3 other subset of slums, Viwandani and others. And these slums are found in a land mass, which was formerly set for industrial growth. Now, there are a set of complex web of problems that these people face, ranging from flooding when there is excess rain, then issue of unreliable water supply, particularly when there is drought. Like currently, recently, our president, Uhuru Kenyatta, declared drought as a national disaster. So we are likely to have intense water rationing, and the most affected are vulnerable, the people living in slum and the other informal settlement. Then the issue of sanitation, poor sanitation in informal settlement. The poor sanitation is actually as a result of the structures, the iron sheet shanties that are constructed as pit latrines that fill and are manually emptied at night, because the people who empty, they have to dump the waste at the adjacent river, which we call Ngong River. So that's also a serious problem. The other problem is the issue of the streets are so narrow. So to address these problems, the government was approached by civil society, academia, and the community after doing a research that found that services at Mukuru's special planning area were so high, and there was a phenomenon called poverty penalty, where people pay many more times, like for water, sanitation, for electricity than any other place within the city. And the city, after seeing that is also a place where economy, the situation of economy in that area is not as the perception has been. It is a very strong economy where the circulation of funds in that area were found to be in excess of 7 billion. So in this area, what happened is that the government immediately after receiving the report initiated the process of declaring Mukuru as a special planning area where government, civil society, community, all stakeholders and politicians and everybody within that area was supposed to participate in different sectors, formed what we call consortium, to come up with the sectoral plans that would be addressed and address the problems I've just mentioned, among others. When asked in water and sanitation, our sector, I happened to have been the team leader, and therefore we came up with the plan. The plan was later shared as a draft, especially after the organization of Nairobi City County. In Kenya, we have 48 in government, national government, and 47 counties. Nairobi is one of the counties, and there are functions which are performed by counties, and one of them is water and sanitation. And there was a reorganization where there was a Nairobi Metropolitan Services as a special purpose vehicle to deliver 4 functions, among them water and sanitation. So when this draft was presented to His Excellency the President, he ordered or directed that the action should start immediately. And in 2020, works started for construction of roads and also construction of water supply systems, and also construction of sewer and sanitation infrastructure. So far, we've been able to capture a number of areas. In terms of the drainage system, roads have been constructed quite a reasonably acceptable standard, and also we've applied what we call simplified sewers, the technology which was really advocated by Water and Sanitation for Urban Poor. They are the ones who developed the standards and took us for training. And after seeing the value of applying that other than conventional system, this would require a lot of displacement. This became very successful. So far, we've been able to connect around 73 households. And also in conventional system where the roads are wide enough, we've been able to connect 61 households, all of them in total 134. We've also been able to do 14.9 kilometers of water and also 12.8 kilometers of sewer. So in terms of resilience, what we've been able to do is that we've been able also to substitute water supply through drilling of boreholes. The target was to drill 10 boreholes, and so far we've drilled in that area 8 boreholes.
Mario, if you could start wrapping up soon, that would be great. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you so much. So we are able to manage the situation in an integrated manner in terms of flood management, flood risk management, drought risk management, and also ensuring sustained water and sanitation services. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mario, for that excellent presentation. And sorry for cutting you short there as you were getting into your stride. Our next speaker is Silva Magaya, Councillor for Lands Planning, Infrastructure and Environment at the Maputo Municipal Council. Silva, you've been working on an innovative programme in one of the low-income communities which combines water, sanitation, land tenure, and spatial planning. I'll hand over you to tell us more, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to share with you and learn from all of you these fruitful experiences. I'm going to briefly describe the Shamankulu Sea Habitat Project. Shamankulu Sea is the name of a neighborhood, highly densified and which grown informally, situated in the heart of Maputo city. And due to this informality, it faces several challenges that need to be urgently addressed in order to improve living conditions, especially now that climate change endangers the most vulnerable communities. The physical patterns described by Eden and Mario are fully similar to what we have here in Maputo in our informal settlements. In the particular case of Shamankulu Sea, the main concerns as aspects are, we have too many narrow streets. In fact, we should not call them streets. They have undignified water and sanitation solutions, and there is completely lack of tenure due to this informality. So as you can imagine, narrow streets hamper the mobility and circulation, promote criminality, particularly at night, and bring constraints to the provision of basic services such as water, electricity, and waste collection. Undignifying water and sanitation solutions, mostly pit latrines, pollute soils and underground water, and expose our common spaghetti solution for water piping to the risk of contamination. In its turn, lack of land tenure restrain the creation of an enabling environment for the needed dialogue between the city authorities and the communities. Those are afraid of losing their assets and hence do not invest in more sound solutions in their plots. These features have been aggravated by the rural-urban migration forced by the cycles of floods and drought, affecting more dramatically the countryside. You must note that due to its geographic location along the Indian Ocean, Mozambique suffered frequently extreme events related to climate change, having been recently hit by two major cyclones in 2019, following a severe drought between 2017 and 2018. So these frequent cyclones and drought and floods cause hunger and environmental problems, often generating health problems and outbreaks of malaria and other waterborne diseases. So it's clear how urgent it is to find an integrated solution for these informal settlements. The Habitat project in Chamankulu Sea I'm talking about is a type of informal settlement upgrading project, integrating water, sanitation, land rights, and spatial planning. It is based on a continuous dialogue between politicians, technicians, and community. This dialogue adopts a common language based on real images. You can see in this slide that we have the situation before and the situation after. Those images are developed and captured with the participation of the families. The image of streets as they were before and as they are now, or after the intervention, represent what we call the mirror of this project. So look at the image on the left and right, and using them, we try to promote the concept of use every drop so that we can improve water networks, electricity grids, improve safety, introduce fecal sludge management as trucks can now drive closer to empty improved latrines. We carry on proper topographic surveys, which helps us develop special plans, and yes, we can issue land deeds to ensure security of land tenure. So the keywords of these projects are first, right to the city, seen as a universal and constitutional human right, and second, the right to participate in this inclusive change, learn, share the cultural knowledge, and enhance the abilities of our technical staff. So we expect then when many kilometers of these narrow roads are widened, a trust bond will be built, becoming the starting point in which politicians and the communities will be together to overcome these challenges of informal settlement. So I return the floor back to you, Steve, and thank you very much for this time. Thank you.
Many thanks, Silva, for that fascinating presentation. I think that concept of the right to the city is so important. So I'm now going to close this mini session with 3 recommendations based on these case studies. Firstly, cross-sectoral approaches are really essential. In many communities, as we've seen, there's a range of complex issues which can hinder efforts to improve access to clean water. So we need to build water and sanitation into these cross-sector approaches, and we need to understand how they link, how they connect with other urban challenges. And finally, we call on the donor community to look at how they can facilitate this work by providing funding for cross-sectoral programs aimed to drive urban water resiliency for the poorest. So I'd like to thank our three speakers, Eden, Mario and Silva, for their rich comments. And for the next part of this session, I'm going to hand over to Kata Mulner, water thematic expert at Sustainalytics. Kata, over to you.
Thank you so much, Steve. Hello and welcome everyone physically in the Blue Zone and the Water Pavilion, as well as those of you watching us virtually right now. My name is Kata Molnar and I'm the water thematic expert at Sustainalytics, and it's a pleasure to introduce our segment of this session. For those of you very briefly who are unfamiliar with Sustainalytics, we are a Morningstar company and the leading global provider of environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, research, ratings, and data. We serve more than 900 of the world's leading asset owners and asset managers who incorporate this information into their investment processes. Sustainalytics is probably an unusual stakeholder within the COP process, but we certainly acknowledge our role as well as the importance to raise ambition among both the public and the private sector in order to meet climate and water-related goals. We are very grateful for the organizers of the pavilion and the coordinators of this thematic day for the opportunity to be here today and to be able to contribute to this important event. So we have curated 3 case studies from different corners of the world, and this will all address challenges as well as solutions. Challenges and solutions related to water resilience building at the urban scale. Then the case studies will be presented by leading experts from the University College London, from LDA Design, Organica Water, and Sustainalytics to provide insights about designing resilience to capacity building, innovative wastewater treatment, and better governance systems. So without further ado, I invite the first presenters to introduce themselves and their case study. Over to you, Tom and Georgie.
Thank you, Kata. My name's Tom Perry. I'm a director at LDA Design in the UK, and today I'm going to briefly talk about the social and environmental legacy of the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park in London, and I'm joined by Dr. György Gallik, an innovation designer and climate change advisor working with University College London, who'll talk about the skills that we need within local authorities to produce better design outcomes within our projects. I think we've been hearing a lot about the challenges and the devastation that's caused through more erratic climate change. And I believe we can confront these challenges by bringing different disciplines and stakeholders together and understanding the wider outcomes that can be achieved. We've inherited an engineering and design legacy that over generations has sought not to just solve a problem, but create new opportunities. So 200 years ago, central London was transformed by infrastructure projects that sought to clean up our waterways, but they also enabled rail links and created new public green spaces in the heart of the city. By combining ingenuity with beauty in this way, a superior outcome was delivered, and this is the power of using design thinking and process to help solve our biggest challenges. When LDA Design was brought in to create a new master plan for London's Olympic Park, the strategic aims went beyond regeneration. It was to give people living in East London the same chance of healthy living, prosperous lives as those in other parts of the city. I've been living on the edge of the site for 20 years, watching it slowly transform, but just 15 years ago, this is what it looked like. It was a complex 75-hectare site, completely fragmented by rail and rivers and power lines. It was London's leftover space. It was a bit of a dumping ground. There was no real long-term purpose. But the ambition was to use the park to stitch together the surrounding areas and become the focus for the wider community as well as the games. The landscape was what would connect people in place and build environmental and social resilience into the city. This meant that identifying the true asset of the riverine park, the neglected River Lee. The riverbanks had to be pulled right back all the way through the park to give the river a presence and the park a better focus. And by working at this scale, this collaboration between designers and engineers and a range of other stakeholders removed 5,000 homes out of the 1 in 100-year flood risk zone to the south and east of the park, as seen on this before and after map. The park naturally floods at times of heavy rainfall. The initial view was that this landscape would flood in only exceptional rainfall events, perhaps once every 10 years. In practice, it's now happening around 10 times a year. But the park has also broken down boundaries. 38 bridges have helped to overcome the physical barriers. East London has been transformed by stitching together pedestrian and cycle networks. And there have been 39 million visitors in the 9 years following the Olympics. And for me and my family who live on the edge of the park, it was critical to our mental and physical health during the last 18 months of repeated COVID lockdowns. The power of the park has always been in its social purpose, but London's Olympics demonstrates the impact of strategic, multidisciplinary thinking. This created value where there was none and created environmental and social resilience in a rapidly changing world. Yogi.
Thank you, Tom. It's great to be here today. Thanks for having us. So working with many amazing local authorities delivering change on the ground, some commonalities of their challenges have become apparent. How do we make sure that local authorities can enable transformational projects like Tom's example, based on research and evidence aligned with climate action? Understanding the barriers to enable meaningful change will be key. The biggest barriers are still siloed working and thinking, the lack of diversity, a massive gap of skilled workers to deliver on our climate targets, which is also an amazing employment opportunity, the tensions between different well-intended policies that conflict on the ground. Diversity was identified as the most important aspect of collective intelligence. So the more diverse group you work with, the more innovative and resilient your ideas become. Layers of diversity might include ethnicity, geographical location, gender, discipline, and age. The tools you have to take action might be by applying a mission-oriented approach, redesigning procurement, set up processes that enables your team to collaborate better and meaningfully, give funding and, for example, stimulus packages with conditionalities that are aligned with green recovery, and enforce, for example, businesses to disclose their climate-related risks, like those examples in New Zealand. Support your team to develop cross-cutting skills that might be risk analysis, as well as anything that improves cognitive flexibility so they are able to change perspective and adapt to changes. Case officers need to be skilled to understand the entire delivery process, from establishing strategic planning policy through viability assessment, technical stages of master planning, detailed design, procurement, construction, future governance, and long-term management agreements, all this through leadership and skillful negotiations with landowners and developers. Think holistically, so not only focus on human-centered, but humanity-centered design. What I mean by this, that really try to understand how your interventions play out at scale and can have detrimental impact at a social and planetary scale. Think through more creative and qualitative indicators, and KPIs. So there is a nice example from the Canadian economist Yannick Baudin on, in average, 10 girls cycle to school every day, implying that they have access to education, that they actually have or can afford the bicycle in the first place, and they have a safe cycle lane as well as a low crime neighborhood, so their parents let them cycle. So how do we make sure that we start thinking around social and environmental value and use more qualitative cornerstone indicators that represent the health of a city? You will
30
need
seconds, Georgie. Thank you.
You will need skills to assess what is considered to be high quality good design, how to assess impact, how to say no to greenwashing, or how to choose the right partners to work with in the first place. When you start taking risk and trialing, iterating interventions, make sure that you stick long enough to them and have the tenacity, at least 6 to 18 months. This is learning from Waltham Forest and West Auckland, and make sure that bring the community and local businesses with you through meaningful co-design of interventions. And finally, playbooks, frameworks, strategic visions, and theories are really important and great, but we need to start taking practical action and design the right feedback loops so policies can be informed by practice. Thank you, Kata. And I hand over to Attila, I believe.
Thank you very much. So there we are. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Attila Badner. I'm an architect. And 23 years ago, I established a company to develop with a friend of mine to develop a key component of the sustainable urban water cycle. Could you please show the slide? There we go. Next, please. We face water scarcity around the world, and we know that more and more of the same is coming in the future. As officials in charge of securing water supplies in the cities look around, they find that one of the most reliable water resources these days are in the water treatment plants. So they realize that the treated water needs to be recycled and be brought back to the city. What you see here are wastewater treatment plants built using different technologies. They are different in technological details, but they share the same overall characteristics. They are large, they're smelly, and a little bit disgusting. This is why we build them outside the cities. The result is that we end up pumping the water, wastewater over long distances, and then pump the recycled water back again. But pumping water is very energy intensive and therefore has a large carbon footprint. So 23 years ago, we set out to develop something better that we can move into the city. But it's important to keep in mind that in addition to physical footprint, wastewater treatment plants also have a psychological footprint. So you may ask, what is a psychological footprint? If I ask you, how close would you buy a house to such a plant, what would be your answer? Now the answer is the physical footprint, the psychological footprint. So by the way, people invariably say as far as possible. We got our inspiration from the outhouse. The outhouse evolved into beautiful bathrooms close to our kitchens. So we thought that if that was possible, then we can turn the ugly, smelly, disgusting treatment plant into something much nicer. And as we thought about it, we realized that they have to be much smaller, they have to use less energy, and has to be free of water, and has to be aesthetic. So we identified three components, namely technology, nature, and architecture. And we merged to achieve this goal, and we merged these three components, and that gave rise to the water resource garden. Now, fast forward a few years, and what you see here are the facilities. This is how they are built. They are different in capacity. Some of them serve a few thousand people, some of them hundreds of thousands of people, but they share the same characteristics in that they are much smaller in footprint, lower in energy use, and have this botanical garden look and feel. Now, today, there are more than 120 plants in various stages around the world. I'm going to show you some examples how they appear in the cities. The first one is in Canada. This is a suburb of Vancouver. Once the town officials realized that the wastewater treatment plant can be replaced by a water recycling garden, they decided to build it smack in the middle of town. You can see the marina on top of the slide and the greenhouse in the middle. The houses across the facility go for $200,000–300,000 each. And this treatment plant is not even called a wastewater treatment plant. It's called the Water Resource Center. The next picture is the first one we built in France 11 years ago. Today, there are more than 30 such plants in France alone. Now, under the plants, the green plants, there are 5-meter deep reactors where a combination of natural roots and these white things on the picture are engineered root systems that provide the habitat for a very wide range of biology. And these organisms feed on the content of the wastewater. By this methodology, we create much higher biodiversity and much more biomass in the reactors. The solution can be applied not only for new plants, but for older ones can be upgraded and turned into these gardens. This 50-year-old plant, we were called in to increase capacity and improve treatment characteristics. And on a typical open day, there are over 2,000 visitors admiring the marvels of nature. The next picture shows an example in the Philippines, and you can see that in warm climates, we don't need the greenhouse, but only shading structures. What you can see here is a water resource garden wedged between two high-rise residential buildings, and the water is directly recycled into the apartments. So now, hopefully it is clear that the traditional solution can be replaced by localized and dispersed treatment in the city, thereby eliminating significant infrastructure and operational inefficiencies. My last example is in Shanghai. This 40-year-old plant that you see in yellow used to be outside the city, but over time it has been surrounded by residential development. And this is what people looked at from their living room, and this is what they smelled. And we came in, increased treatment characteristics, and this is what it turned out to be. You can see the interiors, the exterior, and you can see how this eyesore became a feature of the neighborhood. Thank you very much for your attention. I turn it over to who comes next? Luke.
Hi, thanks Attila for that inspirational talk. So yes, my name is Luke Raftis, and I'm a Associate Director of Utilities Research at Sustainalytics. As Kata mentioned, Sustainalytics is a ESG research provider, and we provide research in a lot of different areas. Can you skip to the next slide, please? And the next. Yeah, so we have a presence around the world, and next slide, please. We provide a wide range of research on environmental, social, and governance topics, but one of our core focuses is on assessing companies based on their management of ESG issues. And so we have research a broad suite of indicators for the companies we cover, assessing management systems, the strengths of policies and programs, as well as quantitative performance indicators. For water utilities, some examples might be physical climate risk indicators, looking at the robustness of companies' risk assessment, reporting, and management structures, and as well as initiatives related to climate risk. Another core aspect of our management assessment is controversy research, and we track news about global news about all the companies we cover, and about involvement in situations that present risk or impacts to either stakeholders or to the company itself. So for utilities, for water utilities, this could be things like drinking water contamination events and environmental contamination, bribery, serious accidents, penalties for failings of service, and so forth. And so we synthesize and score these, and they have a negative effect on the management scores for the companies. And the logic there being that if a company has strong management in terms of policies and programs, if they're regularly implicated in controversial activities, then this represents a failure of effective management. Next slide, please. So today I'm going to provide a little case study on one of the more interesting controversies that's come up in the water utility space in recent years, and it relates to the 2019 Manila water crisis, which is kind of a complicated case, but I think there's some interesting lessons to take away. So Metro Manila area had a high population growth for some time, and also a relatively old municipal water system, one of the oldest in Asia, which meant in practice that there was a lot of leakage as well as pilferage. And there had historically been shortages during the driest periods, typically El Nino cycles, but 2019 was a particularly bad year. So during being in a monsoon climate, there's a heavy reliance on reservoirs for storing water seasonally, and the city is dependent on a single reservoir, Angat, for 97% of its water supply. And this is brought in through a series of aqueducts and pumping stations. The second closest but much smaller reservoir is La Mesa, which is much more of a smaller reservoir that's filled by the Angat system. So it's more of a reserve tank. Overall, this meant that there's very limited water supply, which can fluctuate from year to year, and a steadily growing demand. Next slide, please. So the two water companies that operate water concessions are Manila Water Co. and Maynilad Water Services, which serve the east and west parts of the city, respectively. Metropolitan Water Sewage and Sewerage System is a government agency, and it operated the whole system prior to privatization, and it still has a regulatory role as well as a role in securing new water supplies. So 2019 was a very dry year, and Manila Water was already supplying more demand than their allocated water. And so they resorted to drawing down the reservoir at La Mesa and used almost all the water there before the dry season had really fully started. So throughout the summer, millions of residents faced low water pressure, limited or intermittent supply, and really had to resort to getting water from trucks and other really problematic situations, especially for the poor. And so some water was shared from the other concession, but even still there was problems. And certainly there was some technical and logistical problems. For example, some of the intake gates at La Mesa Dam were too high to draw water properly from the lower levels from the aqueducts. There was a big delay in construction in one of the new water treatment plants, and certainly rationing earlier could have softened the crisis. However, there's a growing consensus that the main cause is sort of a supply and demand problem and that new water sources are required. Next slide, please. So the crisis has spurred approvals for several large water projects. One of the central issues is that the development of new water supplies has been delayed for a long time for several reasons. There's no single party that is solely responsible. The water utilities did apply to build some and did, but others were turned down for being too expensive. The largest project, the new Centennial Water Source project, has been on the table for decades, but it's been held up for approvals and financing issues. It's also controversial as it will flood natural areas and displace indigenous groups, and it's expensive, involving a 23-kilometer tunnel under a mountain range. So various incarnations of this project have come and gone over the years, often to be shelved by the incoming government. Several short and medium-term projects have also been approved, including one that had previously been rejected for being too expensive, as it relies on advanced water treatment to draw water from Laguna Lake, which has a turbidity and pollution issues there. So next. So what can we take away from this? I think it very clearly underscores the importance of having really well-defined roles for regulators, utilities, government agencies in terms of developing projects. There's definitely a lack of clarity and planning in the long term for demand growth and mitigation. So this is a real key point. Climate change was only a minor point here, but it certainly will be a factor going forward globally, especially in places that are monsoon climates. So that has to be modeled in. There's a lot of water that can be saved from reducing non-revenue water. Initially, that probably delayed some of the requirements for new resources. And finally, really big projects can take a long time to develop and can face political interference. So having a diversity of smaller projects tends to move things along better and may even render larger projects unnecessary. And with that, I'll turn it back to Kata.
Yes, thank you so much, Luke, and thank you for all the speakers to be on time. I think we are really heading to a great closing remarks. But before that, just a couple of few last thoughts. I really see lots of common threads here. For example, in order to make water access resilient to climate change, we need to really connect water with other urban issues in a multidisciplinary approach, right? We need a sustainable urban water cycle to be truly circular, and the pathway to urban water resilience really needs holistic approaches, considering different dimensions from really infrastructure to governance, environmental, social, and human approaches. So really thank you once again for all the speakers. On behalf of Sustainalytics, I thank you for your participation, and I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Umamesh, who will give his framing our whole session and give his closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Kata, and thank you for all the speakers to keeping up with the time and also having some time for the few concluding remarks. I think for people in Stockholm and people like me working from home, it's been a whirlwind too. We have been having speakers talk about initiatives and research in Stockholm, and we also had people talking about Vishakhapatnam, Abuja, Nairobi, Maputo, London, and a few examples from Canada and France, and also the current problems which is happening in the recent problem which is happening in Manila. So of course, to summarize it, one of the key issues which is emerging is water challenge is something which is critical, whether the city is big or small, whether the city comes from a developed nation or from a developing nation. The challenges are highly different. It requires a holistic approach, which was stressed by Panchali in her initial thought, which was followed by Dr. Lakshmina, who was talking about the various initiatives which are being undertaken by the government to manage the water systems within the city, right from not only talking about the water harvesting, rain harvesting interventions, but also to how do they look in terms of some of the risks which the city is prone to, especially the cyclone. This was followed by Dr. Liberty and Tom talking about the blue and green infrastructure. It was a nice continuity coming into how the city infrastructure systems should not only look in terms of these hard physical infrastructure, but also the blue and green infrastructure should look in terms of approaches to building something at a community level, and something which includes multi-institutional. We saw universities from UK and also some of the universities in Abuja getting together and doing a research for developing a new city, which is much more green and livable. This was followed by the challenges at a community level. So at a city level, of course, there is a need for champions to take action, but at a community level, things become much more complex. And I think Eden Mati from Nairobi and Dr. Mario Kangina did stress on the water resilience issues, more in terms of the sanitation and also the sewage and septage. So water is not only about the blue water, but it is also about the gray water. It is also about something intermediate. How do you treat it? How do you transport it? And how do you also ensure that it is, people have safe access? I think in the word which requires stressing is, access with dignity. I think that is something which the speaker did highlight about, and it's very important to ensure that people do have access, and that reduces a lot of burden, especially the disease burden, which was followed by Sylvia, which he clearly mentioned, especially for the Maputo city, around land tenure. What is the importance of land tenure so that people go about investing in these kinds of infrastructure? What is the role of roads and mobility, where you require things to moving it safely from the source to take it to water management or the treatment facility. I think Gregory and Tom from UCL did talk about take us to London to talk about how do you integrate beauty, in all this process. I think that's more important, even though we are talking about complex issues, we are talking about waste management. I think there is always a sense of beauty which can be brought about, and that can enable people to take ownership of it and also have a much more better quality of life around these, hard infrastructure. And that was followed by Attila, who really talked about the psychological footprint of having a treatment facility near your house, and the word, he used as water resource garden. I think that's what we need to call these places, rather than water treatment plant, they need to be called as water resource garden or water labs, to make it sound much more better for people to actually own it. But it's not only making it sound better, but it also needs to, one needs to feel better in terms of the smell, in terms of the creating the aesthetics around it, creating plantation around it, so that people feel comfortable having it. And I think the case of Canada having it right in the middle of the city is a good inspiration for some of the other cities to follow that particular model. And of course, it was ended by Luke, who talked about the Manila water crisis. And once again, what he stressed on is the complexity of the issue. It's not simple. It has multiple things. It has water, it needs to be managed at a catchment within the reservoir, within the city, and how people need to be informed so that they start planning it better. So we had wonderful set of speakers. I thank them all, and I hope everybody listening to this also equally enjoyed it. And we are right on time too. And hopefully we adopt some of these practices, and we also link up with these people in the future to make sure that we learn from them and also implement them in our cities. Thank you very much.